And last, but certainly not least, Paul Snow, the chief blockchain scientist of Inveniam, as well as at DeFi Devs. So with that, folks, DeFi is obviously the latest genie out of the bottle. We've seen absolutely insane applications be developed, and we know that this is creating an entirely new set of financial applications to take advantage of. But we've seen a lot of concerns around security, scalability, and, shocker, safety and reliability. So let's talk about that for a second, panel. Is DeFi actually being let's call it stopped from succeeding and moving forward because of the scalability, reliability, and safety?
Well, actually, not at all. I think as far as security and whatnot, we have other parties. There are a lot of technologies today on various platforms like Ethereum and Solana and all that are scalable or will be scalable. So we have no problem with scalability, and we're working on the Accumulate protocol for data and security as a fundamental layer and identity, and it will certainly be scalable.
That's all great news, I think, right? So Paul, let's talk a little bit more about this recent announcement, and I assume you kind of led the charge on making it possible for on-chain data for Inveniam clients to actually leverage the blockchain. Why is this so important? Explain why you guys did this.
Well, the need for Inveniam is to have cryptographic proof of history and provenance of data. That way we can work with Chainlink and collect data efficiently and distribute it. The Accumulate protocol becomes a interconnect, nearly universal, that allows for us to create multiple parties that double check and triple check interactions between other platforms, whether they're IoT or conventional applications or other blockchains. And the idea is to create security models on the blockchain that reflect the same kinds of security models that we use in our businesses and in our private interactions, where we have layered double checks that ensure that critical transactions get multiple sets of parties laying eyes on them. And so we're building this infrastructure to model security and to create transparency and orchestration of decision-making on the blockchain that uses all the same paradigms that everyone's already used to, whether you're talking about developers or users.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, that's also where identity, of course, comes into play. Especially working, for instance, for a corporation, for an enterprise, you have a role within that company. You have certain mandates, maybe. And what we will see in the future is not only the decentralization of data, of companies working together in exchanging that information with each other, knowing the provenance, knowing that that data is factually correct, can be verified, but also the people involved. What we will see is that interactions will become more decentralized as well, more peer-to-peer like we normally interact in the real world. And we will see that with technology as well. And identity means that you really want to know, hey, is this person standing in front of me? Is he really a representative of this company? Does he have the mandate, for instance, to sign something? And that's where self-sovereign identity and by extension, basically, the underlying identities of Accumulate can come into play, but also to ensure that basically all those different platforms can communicate with each other about identity. So you don't want to be ending up on those in this silo, basically, where basically everyone needs to be in that same silo and only then being able to talk or to verify each other. No, you want to have this as a means of verifying the data, no matter what anchors are being used, for instance, or what blockchain technology is being used. And that's where both I guess accumulate comes into play, the standards come into play, so the specifications that are being created right now by well-known organizations like the W3C, the Internet Standards Foundation, but also, for instance, foundations like OpenID, which are the leading identity and access management specification foundation. They are all working on these types of technologies, and we are also seeing quite a lot of big organizations in adopting and working on this type of technology. So, for instance, the Microsofts of this world are working with us on this technology, but for instance, also parties like Center, Coinbase, for instance, and also Block, so Jack Dorsey, Twitter, they are all working on this type of technology.
Yeah, I'm going to build on what he built on.
Go for it.
Because it may have passed you by, but the W3C is a digital standard that is blockchain agnostic. That means that what we're building, though it may have neat features for Inveniam and for our customers and for our investors in some sense, the identities we're building interoperate with all the other W3C compliant digital identities that are out in the crypto space. And I just thought I'd underscore
Good addition,
that. Yeah. Anyway.
You guys are all making a pretty convincing argument that for sure we are moving away from the high fly rates, as you're saying, and to real use cases, real applications that real institutions and real companies and businesses are saying, look, we can actually merge this in and take advantage of this. So maybe we could stop focusing on, well, this isn't going to work. This is working. And let's talk about maybe some of our favorite use cases that we see happening. We don't necessarily have to name any names, but how do we go from high flying rates to this is DeFi, taking it to the next level, and you can't use the Inveniam example?
Oh, I
That
can't.
one's obvious.
All right. Well, there are a lot of problems in the world that involve integration with the real world and blockchains. And in the end, about the only thing you can do is create a distributed set of validators that have visibility into the real world and can sign for the data coming into the blockchain. And what Inveniam is doing with Accumulate is, boy, that's really loud when I talk to you. You're a loud guy. What we're doing with Accumulate is making it fairly straightforward to create these distributed layers, to validate the data that are subject matter knowledgeable and dedicated to the purpose, to bring the data into the blockchain and bring it out of the blockchain. And in the case of loyalty points, you may want to gamify those loyalty points. You may want those loyalty points attached to an identity, in which case we're set up for that because we have the identity management. And then we have the review of process layer, so that if you're pulling in certain hashes and data that shouldn't go on to, or tokens, that shouldn't go on to non-vetted entities, then we have the mechanisms that require the proper authorization for the token to move from a particular vetted identity to another vetted identity. So, like in the previous section, they were talking a little bit about how regulators can impose certain kinds of restrictions on the distribution of NFTs and whatnot, and we're set up to do that in our protocol. So this whole class of problems of making sure the data going through a business process is validated and auditable as it moves through one organization after another. Think of supply chain or the loyalty points, to use the previous example. There's multiple parties that want eyes on the game and be given assurance that all the processes are correct. Because otherwise somebody can riff the game and start taking assets away, and people lose money. And trillions of dollars are lost every year on bad data. And
not if they're using Chainlink and Open Zeppelin in combination.
Yeah. Well, there's security, and then there is correctness. And you and I will agree that you can secure systems doesn't make the data correct. Sure. But the blockchain allows us to create responsibility that spans systems.